grace and this quiet strength that I think I'd always dreamed of.
Breaking news. Pen Badgley is finally opening up about why dating his Gossip Girl co-star Blake Lively was such a struggle. Blake Lively, meanwhile, is reportedly spiraling after Pen exposed the emotional reality behind their once glamorous on-set romance. While Pen battled with identity issues and the pressure of being typecast as Dan Humphrey, Blake allegedly turned their off-screen relationship into a PR opportunity. But now, her carefully crafted image seems to be unraveling, one quiet truth at a time. On April 23, 2025, Pen did something no one expected. He didn't release a tell-all book or go on a social media rant. Instead, he did something far more dangerous for Hollywood's queen of controlled chaos. He told the truth. During his appearance on Call Her Daddy, Pen casually dropped a simple line that sent shockwaves through Blake Lively's PR team. It was a struggle. Just 5 small words. But those words were enough to ignite a media frenzy. Headlines exploded, and Blake's reputation took a major hit. Even her publicist, Stephanie Jones, probably had to put down her oat milk latte to manage the crisis. Pen, known for his calm and thoughtful nature, confirmed what many had quietly suspected. Dating Blake Lively wasn't the picture-perfect fairy tale it appeared to be. It was more like a crisis dressed in couture. Pen went on to explain that working in television is vastly different from film. TV lasts for years, and the line between the actor and the character often blurs. His remarks weren't bitter or vindictive. He spoke with emotional honesty and maturity, something Blake's carefully curated image rarely allows her to show. And that's exactly why his words cut so deep. A calm truth can do far more damage than a loud accusation. You can't spin honesty with a staged baby bump photo shoot or a charitable donation. While Pen didn't attack Blake directly, his words painted a picture of a relationship weighed down by pressure, image, and public expectation. Behind the glamorous facade of Serena and Dan was a very real, very human story of 2 young actors caught in Hollywood's relentless spotlight. Now fans are revisiting their Gossip Girl days with a new lens. The chemistry was real, but so was the chaos. Pen Badgley and Blake Lively's relationship blurred the lines between fiction and reality. They were dating both on-screen and off, essentially living a Tumblr fan fiction, but without the fairy tale ending. While Pen was struggling with an identity crisis, Blake was busy collecting red carpet points like Pokemon cards. It wasn't exactly the wholesome romance the media sold us. Pen has openly admitted that he couldn't separate himself from the role of Dan Humphrey. Fans projected the character onto him like it was a personality transplant. He wasn't Pen anymore. He was Lonely Boy. But Blake Lively didn't seem to mind. In fact, she leaned into it, mastering the art of turning every personal moment into a PR opportunity. Behind the scenes, Blake reportedly poisoned the cast against Pen while he was quietly unraveling under the pressure of fame. She perfected her cool, mysterious girlfriend image, always perfectly dressed, always slightly detached, never too real. Just enough mystery to keep the media intrigued, but never enough vulnerability to seem human. When asked if he could separate his real relationship from his on-screen one, Pen admitted there wasn't enough separation for anyone. And that's the truth that hit hardest. Blake wasn't just playing Serena van der Woodsen, she became her. Only this time, the chaos didn't stay in the script. Pen was just 21 or 22 at the time, barely out of college, still trying to understand who he was, while dating someone who turned privacy into a branding strategy. He said himself that he didn't yet have the emotional maturity to differentiate between who he was and who the world thought he was. People's opinions of Dan Humphrey bled directly into their opinions of Pen Badgley, and that left him trapped in his own character. Meanwhile, Blake played her part flawlessly. As Pen wrestled with questions of self-worth and authenticity, she was smiling for paparazzi cameras like she'd just invented vintage fashion. The emotional gap between them wasn't just noticeable, it was a canyon. And Blake didn't even bring a rope. Pen has said that people couldn't tell the difference between Dan and himself. And while he was trying to find his identity, Blake was playing both roles at once, the doting girlfriend in interviews and the cold strategist behind the scenes. In the end, Pen was left feeling trapped, forced to perform emotionally, even off camera, while Blake continued to polish her public image to perfection. What looked like a picture-perfect Hollywood romance was, in reality, a slow unraveling of two very different people, one trying to find himself and the other trying to sell a version of herself to the world. Pen Badgley says he finally had enough sense, enough intelligence, and enough self-worth to stop losing himself. But imagine having to act even when the cameras weren't rolling, pretending off-screen just to keep the peace in your relationship. Now imagine doing that while your partner is perfectly fine, cashing in on both your fake love story and your very real pain. That's where the real Blake Lively roast begins. Pen opened up about the insane pressure he felt to constantly perform in real life. It was exhausting, surreal, and made him feel like he couldn't just be normal anymore. He said, "You suddenly feel the need to perform, and you're just like, why can't I just say something normal?" Meanwhile, Blake mastered the art of the vague, polished interview, never raw, never honest. Her entire persona functioned like a designer curtain covering the emotional chaos she left behind. While Pen was struggling to stay authentic, Blake exuded effortless grace, as if she didn't even need to try. But the truth? She didn't have to try. She just had to perform. And Blake's favorite weapon? That low-key, mysterious public persona? Please? The woman who famously held a wedding on a plantation suddenly wants to play shy? That's not low-key. That's calculated. It's giving, "I'll walk 3 steps behind you so it looks like we weren't together." Pen recalled how she once told a reporter, "It's not a date," while they were literally at a premiere together. What kind of performance was that? Did she think people just hold hands with their co-stars for fun? Or was this another Blake special, pretending it's casual while feeding the media just enough crumbs to stay in the headlines for another week? And right on cue, the Mirror ran a story days later claiming Pen had said his ex helped save him amid fame struggles. Sounds noble, right? But this wasn't new. It was a recycled quote, repackaged to make Blake look like a hero again. Pen later dropped another quiet bomb. He said he basically never dated in his 20s. Think about that. 3 long-term relationships, including one with the ever-intense Blake Lively, and yet he claims he never really dated. Why? Because it didn't feel like dating, it felt like performing. When you compare that to his current relationship with Domino Kirka, the woman he actually married and is now expecting twins with, the difference is crystal clear. No cameras, no curated image, no chaos, just something real. It's not just a glow-up, it's an emotional escape story. Pen didn't set out to cancel Blake. He didn't need to. All he did was speak softly and truthfully, like someone finally setting down a heavy bag they'd been carrying for 15 years. And somehow, that gentle honesty caused more damage to Blake's Barbie Dreamhouse PR empire than any gossip headline ever could. Because when the quiet ones finally speak, the loud ones panic. And in Blake's case, that panic came fast. Emergency, PR meetings, recycled fluff interviews, and an entire damage control campaign sparked by just 5 simple words. It was a struggle. And honestly, I believe him. Just days after Pen's heartfelt podcast appearance, a conveniently timed Variety article surfaced, practically shouting, "Wait, Blake's a hero, remember?" The piece dragged out an old quote about how she supposedly saved Pen from substance abuse. How noble. How selfless. How completely out of context. It's clear that Pen wasn't trying to start a scandal. He was just telling his truth. But that truth was enough to shake Blake Lively's polished image to its core. Sometimes it doesn't. Take a headline, a scandal, or a tell-all. Just one honest voice saying 5 quiet words. It was a struggle. A struggle. Back in 2023, over 2 years ago, a forgotten quote from Pen Badgley somehow resurfaced. And, conveniently, it reappeared right as Blake Lively found herself tangled in her latest round of affidavit drama. Because, of course, timing is everything in Hollywood PR. Here's what Pen actually said, so let's strip away the spin and read it in a calm, unfiltered voice. I never struggled with substances. But Blake didn't drink, and that helped. That's it. That one simple sentence became the foundation of an entire media fairy tale, the Blake the Redeemer narrative. A casual mention of her sobriety was transformed into a glossy PR campaign, complete with halo lighting, emotional background music, and headlines painting her as some kind of rehabilitation angel. In reality, Pen wasn't confessing to addiction, and Blake wasn't saving him from it. He simply said she didn't drink, and that being with someone sober helped him avoid bad habits. That's not divine intervention. That's just compatibility. But Blake's team spun it into sainthood. They took a tiny personal detail, ran it through the "she's a saint" PR machine, and out came the story of Hollywood's most graceful savior. This is what you call weaponized maturity. Blake didn't rescue Pen from the brink of destruction. She wasn't dragging him out of nightclubs at 2 a.m. in heels and pearls. She just didn't drink. That's it. But her publicists saw an opportunity and turned it into a full-blown redemption arc, right when her image needed it the most. And would you look at the timing? This miraculous narrative just happened to resurface as Blake was facing inconvenient legal problems, subpoenas, affidavit rumors, and all the usual celebrity chaos. But instead of addressing that, her team fed the press a shiny distraction. Look at her. She inspired Pen Badgley to drink water. Give her a Nobel Peace Prize. This wasn't a coincidence. It was damage control disguised as nostalgia. You don't need a forensic team to see whose fingerprints are all over it. Blake's PR squad clearly looked at the fallout from Pen's podcast confession and said, "Quick, find a quote where she sounds like Jesus." The resulting articles didn't just rehash old quotes. They linked to a web of past interviews meant to remind the public how professional and graceful Blake supposedly was. Like that time, a reporter asked Pen what it was like working with Blake after she'd married Ryan Reynolds. His answer? No, we were ultimately professional. Translation: they were cordial, but there's no friendship here. In fact, Pen summed it up best years earlier when he told HuffPost there was an amicable silence between them. If that makes any sense. And honestly, it does. It's the kind of polite nothing you say when you want to shut down a question without starting a fire. When someone later asked if he'd sent Blake and Ryan a wedding gift, Pen delivered a masterclass in elegant shade. No, I didn't. But you know, there's an amicable silence. In other words, they don't talk. They don't text. And she's definitely not getting a Christmas card. So while the media continues polishing Blake's halo with recycled quotes and soft-focused nostalgia, the truth remains simple. Pen never said she saved him. He said she didn't drink. The rest? That's pure PR magic, Hollywood's favorite illusion. Now tell me that's not the most elegant way of saying absolutely not, and I wouldn't even if you paid me. Pen Badgley has never publicly bashed Blake Lively, not once. But what he has done is quietly drop these precise, surgical little truth bombs, each one small enough to seem harmless, yet sharp enough to slice straight through Blake's carefully curated PR facade. He's never been messy or bitter. Instead, he speaks with calm reflection, describing his years on Gossip Girl like a 6-season hostage situation in designer shoes, while Blake, meanwhile, wasn't trapped in the chaos. She was orchestrating it. He was caught up in the machine. She was conducting it. When Pen was asked about their relationship, his response was simple. Like anything valuable, it was good, it was bad, and it was a learning experience. And when the interviewer pressed, "Did you send Blake and Ryan a wedding gift?" he replied, "No, I didn't." Elegant, controlled, the verbal equivalent of sipping tea while the house burns behind you. That's Pen's quiet power. He refuses to play the game. No scandal, no rage, no direct attacks, just silence. And silence for someone like Blake is unbearable. She can't trend it, twist it, or monetize it. So what does she do? Cue the savior narrative, the reboot. But this time nobody's buying it. Because when her polished image started cracking under the weight of Pen's quiet honesty, she did what she always does, tried to spin the story. After a mere 2 minutes of bad press, she allegedly attempted to shift the blame onto him. But the internet had already caught on. The America's sweetheart mask was slipping, and people were finally seeing the pattern. And oh, the downfall was glorious. Within days of Pen's podcast airing, every gossip outlet, from The Mirror to Popcorn Planet, was scrambling to control the narrative. Fluffy, remember the good times pieces started flooding the feed. Articles reminded readers of how Pen once said nice things, desperate to steer the story back to safety. But social media wasn't having it. The audience wasn't fooled anymore. Commentators pointed out that Pen clearly wasn't trying to drag her. He just spoke with honesty and maturity. He wasn't afraid to talk about the past. He just refused to do it in a way that fed the PR machine, and that's what made his words sting more than any insult could. Then the internet did what it does best. It remembered everything. The plantation wedding, the conveniently timed NAACP donation, the Magnolia Pearl slave muffin disaster, the tone-deaf boob cake feminism photos, the endless interviews where Blake preached about privacy right before staging a photo op. It all came flooding back like a repressed memory triggered by one tiny phrase. It was a struggle. Pen wasn't trying to destroy anyone. He was explaining what it was like to be young, overwhelmed, and trapped between reality and a TV fantasy. But that single moment of honesty, 5 quiet words, did what no scandal ever could. It made people see through the illusion. And when the quiet one speaks truthfully, the loud one loses control. And suddenly, the internet started digging harder than TMZ on payday. Receipts, photos, awkward timelines, everything resurfaced. And what did Blake do? Nothing. Or rather, she couldn't. For once, the crowd didn't want a manufactured villain. They wanted a mirror. Pen, without trying, held it up. Remember those patchwork Magnolia Pearl jeans she loves to trot out? Yep. The same ones people joked about were real-life jeans. Even the pop culture blogs said it out loud. Blake tends to reappear with a savior edit every time controversy hits. That's not coincidence. It's strategy. But it only works when there's a clear bad guy to defeat. Pen refused to play that role. He calmly told his truth, and in doing so, he exposed how performative her empowered woman branding often is. Then there's the Boone Plantation wedding in South Carolina. Marrying on a plantation is not a neutral fashion choice, it carries history. Critics ask the obvious questions. Whose history? Were there slaves here? Did bad things happen on this land? The optics are stark. You don't get to sell feminism while building your legacy on controlling narratives and burying anyone who won't play along. That's not empowerment. That's PR theater, wrapped in designer heels. This time, the spin backfired because Pen didn't hand her the drama she needed. No explosive headlines, no Instagram breakdown, no ex-boyfriend meltdown, just quiet, reflective honesty delivered like a therapy session. That alone was enough to make the Blake Lively illusion collapse like a Magnolia Pearl runway in a wind tunnel. While her PR machine pushed sympathetic "Remember the Good Times" pieces, a Black Friday-level bargain bin of supportive ex-narratives in People and similar outlets, Pen moved on. He's living his life talking about his kids thriving, and without raising his voice, he made her aesthetic implode. Sometimes the most brutal takedown isn't a tweet or a tell-all. Sometimes it's just a man saying calmly, "It was a struggle," while the rest of the world finally sees behind the curtain. Let's talk aftermath. If Gossip Girl was a launchpad, Blake rode it straight to red carpet royalty, fashion campaigns, lead roles lit like butter, magazine spreads that call her timeless, while airbrushing any hint of controversy out of the frame. Meanwhile, Pen was left lugging a suitcase labeled Dan Humphrey's emotional baggage through the terminal of public opinion. It wasn't a fair split. Blake didn't just get the better PR agent, she got the better narrative. She became the elegant, relatable it girl who bakes banana bread and wears Chanel in the same breath. Pen? He was doing Cosmo Girl and Vogue interviews about dating even as he admitted he was bad at it. Now she started a fight she might not win. The internet has a long memory, and once people start pulling on that thread, the whole sweater comes undone. Whether you think Pen was being gentle or merciless, his refusal to dramatize the past left Blake with nothing to control. And that loss of control is the most corrosive PR wound of all. Control is the most corrosive PR wound of all.